I find this particularly interesting that LBJ says we can understand this without rancor or hatred. It's a lot easier for a white guy to say that than a black guy. But this is what he said, that we're going to set hatred behind us. And we're going to acknowledge our history, and we're going to acknowledge the nature of humankind. Well, here he is.
The reasons are deeply embedded in history and tradition and the nature of man. We can understand without rancor or hatred how this all happened. But it cannot continue. Our Constitution, the foundation of our republic, forbids it. The principles of our freedom forbid it. Morality forbids it. And the law I will sign tonight forbids it.
And thus kicked off, an era of, a decade certainly, of incredible violence in the South. George Washington, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. Lester Maddox, axe handle Lester, standing in front of the university with his axe handle. George Wallace standing at the university doors. I mean, it's just, it is, thus began this process. Lyndon Johnson goes on to point out, this was not, I just didn't pull this thing out. This was, let's do this. After all, this is right after Kennedy was assassinated. This is less than a year after. This is 7 months after Kennedy was assassinated. And LBJ reaches back to the memory of Kennedy to encourage people to support him in this effort. Here he is.
That law is the product of months of the most careful debate and discussion. It was proposed more than 1 year ago by our late and beloved President, John F. Kennedy. It received the bipartisan support of more than 2/3 of the members of both the House and the Senate. An overwhelming majority of Republicans, as well as Democrats, voted for it. It has received the thoughtful support of tens of thousands of civic and religious leaders in all parts of this nation. And it is supported by the great majority of the American people.
Yeah. As is today, for example, extending long-term unemployment benefits, but we can't even get John Boehner to call for a vote on that, but I digress. He said that an overwhelming majority of Republicans as well as Democrats voted for it. It's a really interesting thing. In 1964, the major party of the racists in the United States in the South was the Democratic Party. And in parts of the North, George Wallace took Michigan in the 68 presidential primary. Now, he took it because Michigan had open primaries and Republicans were voting in the primary to make the Democrats look bad. But still, Michigan sent George Wallace as its delegate to the Democratic National Convention. But immediately, Nixon latched onto this and said, LBJ's given up the Southern white racists. We'll take them.